Mate, the whole thing's a stitch up, and no one's saying it out loud. Anthony Albanese rocks up in Queenstown with that politician grin plastered on his face, acting like this cozy weekend with Christopher Luxon is all about deepening bonds and strengthening the alliance. Give me a break. Behind the handshakes and photo ops, it's the same old game, two leaders smiling for the cameras while quietly sorting out who's gonna get screwed over in the next round of economic deals. They talk about a single economic market like it's some gift to the people, but in reality, it's more about making it easier for big corporates to shift money, dodge taxes, and control the market on both sides of the ditch. And you know what? They'll spin it as job creation while your grocery bill keeps climbing faster than a roux on a sugar high. Before we tear the mask off this Albanese-Luxon mateship theatre, where Albo smiles for the cameras, Luxon plays the polite Kiwi host, and behind closed doors they're carving up the Pacific like it's a Sunday roast. Smash that like button like you're booting political spin straight across the Tasman. Subscribe if you're done with the fake handshakes and PR fluff. And grab the "Can I vote for a kangaroo?" shirt, links in the description. You can almost smell the staged sincerity when Albanese bangs on about modernizing the rules-based trading system. Sounds noble, right? But let's be real, those rules are written by the very countries and corporations that benefit from keeping wages low and costs high. And Luxon's no innocent bystander here. He's grinning ear to ear because he knows his Kiwi business mates are about to cash in. But the everyday Aussie and Kiwi? We're just the pawns. We're the ones copping the cost of living crisis while they sign deals in fancy hotels overlooking postcard-perfect mountains. If it wasn't so tragic, it'd be bloody hilarious. And don't even get me started on the China situation. They'll tell you these talks are all about managing the relationship with Beijing, like there's some kind of wise uncles keeping the family out of trouble. But they're dancing on a knife's edge, mate. Both Albanese and Luxon just came back from China trips, shaking hands and pretending everything's peachy while, behind the scenes, the region's getting stitched up in security pacts and trade deals that'll have us paying for decades. They love to say Pacific stability, like it's a magic spell, but let's call it what it is, keeping China close enough to make money off them, but far enough to still be America's obedient little mates. Now, here's where it gets really grubby, Trump's tariffs. Oh yeah, they're pretending to be all diplomatic about it, but deep down both Albanese and Luxon know this is a mess. Australia gets a sweet 10% deal because Uncle Sam's feeling generous, while New Zealand cops a 15% slap in the face. Luxon's trying to play it cool, but you can bet he's fuming behind closed doors. And here's the kicker. Instead of pushing back properly, they'll probably cook up some quiet agreement that shifts the losses onto consumers. That means you, me, and every other poor bugger paying more for imports while they pat themselves on the back for resolving trade tensions. Then there's the deportation drama. Oh, they love to say it's all being handled sensitively now, but the numbers don't lie. More Kiwis are being kicked out of Australia than in years, even if they've spent their whole lives here. Albanese is selling it like it's protecting our communities, but it's just political theatre. Luxon's pretending he's engaging closely to fix it, but really, it's a handy wedge issue for him too. He gets to look tough on crime without actually solving the root problem. And what's that root problem? The fact that these deportees come back to NZ, join the same gangs, and keep the crime stats high, which then justifies even more tough policies. It's a never-ending cycle they're not actually interested in breaking. Right, so here's where the whole thing starts to reek worse than a fish market on a 40-degree day. Everyone's been yapping about how Albanese and Luxon are united on the Israel-Gaza crisis, but that's just the headline. Scratch beneath the surface, and you see two leaders walking a tightrope between their moral posturing and the quiet deals they don't want you to know about. Both countries say they don't recognize Palestinian statehood yet, but they'll throw in the "we support a two-state solution" line to keep the UN crowd happy. Meanwhile, they've both been careful not to rock the boat too hard with Washington, because the second you upset the Yanks, the flow of defense contracts and military favors starts to dry up. And trust me, those billion-dollar weapons deals don't just keep us safe, they keep certain donors and lobbyists grinning like they just won the pokies. But here's the part that should make your blood boil. When Israel's Security Council pushes for the takeover of Gaza City and Penny Wong comes out with the permanent force displacement is a violation of international law speech, it sounds like we're taking a stand. Yet in the same breath, Australia's still signing off on defence exports that end up in the hands of the same allies doing the bulldozing. Luxon, on the other hand, is doing the classic Kiwi sidestep, talking about humanitarian aid and increasing support while refusing to actually put his foot down in any meaningful way. Why? Because playing it safe keeps the trade doors open and the US happy. And if you think that's a coincidence, you've been living under a rock. Let's not pretend this whole "we're partners in the Pacific" shtick is all sunshine and haka dances either. This is about influence, straight up, no sugarcoating. China's been splashing cash around the islands like it's happy hour, building ports, schools, and friendship centers while slipping their political hooks in. Albanese and Luxon see it, and they're worried, not because they suddenly care about the locals, but because losing influence means losing control of shipping routes, resources, and fishing rights. That's why you're seeing all this talk about deepening our defense partnership and supporting our Pacific neighbors. It's the same old chess game, just dressed up in friendlier language. And in this game, the pawns are entire island nations being used as bargaining chips between Beijing, Canberra, and Wellington. Now let's talk about that so-called tourism boost everyone's crowing about. Queenstown's being painted as the perfect backdrop for these talks: stunning lakes, snow-capped mountains, luxury hotels. But this isn't about showing off the scenery to Aussie tourists. Nah, mate, this is about setting the stage for more money to be pumped into the hands of corporate tourism operators while the locals get priced out of their own backyards. New Zealand's even floating the idea of charging a fee to visit its natural sites. Sounds harmless, right? Until you realize those fees will get bundled into overpriced package tours and quietly used to plug budget holes rather than actually preserving the environment. And you can bet Aussie tourism moguls are sniffing around, ready to partner up and take their cut. And the brain drain? Don't even get me started. 30,000 Kiwis packing up and moving to Australia in a single year isn't just a trend, it's a crisis. Luxon's smiling like it's all under control, but losing that many skilled workers in such a short time leaves gaping holes in the economy. And guess who benefits? Albanese and his business backers, because those workers slot straight into Aussie industries crying out for cheap, skilled labor. It's like robbing your neighbor's pantry and then inviting them over for dinner, serving their own food back to them, and acting like you're doing them a favor. Behind closed doors, these two blokes aren't just talking trade and defense. They're talking migration settings, worker mobility, and how to quietly iron out the inconveniences of competition. Don't be fooled when they talk about harmonizing regulations and removing barriers. What they really mean is making it easier for big companies to pay workers less, move operations wherever it's cheaper, and dodge accountability when things go pear-shaped. And here's the kicker, the media's playing along. All you'll see on the nightly news is the Maori welcome ceremony, the smiling handshake, maybe a few shots of them pretending to enjoy a coffee together. What you won't see is the two of them in a private lounge, huddled over briefing papers with a couple of foreign advisors whispering in their ears. Those conversations, the real ones, are where the most controversial decisions are being teed up. But we won't know the full fallout until months later, when policies quietly shift, prices creep up, and someone shrugs it off as market forces. The truth is, Albanese and Luxon need each other. Not because they're mates, but because politically, it's safer to have the other bloke covering your back when the heat's on. Luxon gets to ride Australia's coattails in defence and trade negotiations, and Albanese gets to look like a regional statesman without having to take all the risk himself. But while they're both patting each other on the back, the everyday Aussie and Kiwi are the ones copping the raw end of the deal: higher costs, fewer rights, and decisions being made in rooms we'll never be allowed into. If you think I'm exaggerating, just wait. The announcements from this weekend will sound harmless enough: some new cooperation framework here, a tourism boost there. But buried in the fine print will be the seeds of changes that make life harder for the average worker while making the well-connected even richer. It's the same playbook every time. Smile for the cameras, talk about unity, and quietly move the chess pieces while no one's watching. And mate, they're counting on us to be too distracted by the photo ops to notice. And here's the bit they'll never admit: both Albanese and Luxon are quietly green-lighting defense projects that are going to bleed our budgets dry for decades, all under the banner of regional security. You think this stuff is just about keeping China at bay? Nah, mate, this is about keeping the weapons manufacturers in business and locking our militaries into deals we can't wriggle out of. Every submarine, every patrol aircraft, every joint training exercise comes with a price tag that makes your eyes water. And who's picking up the tab? Us. Ordinary taxpayers who are already smashed by rent, mortgages, and grocery prices that make you think you're shopping at some boutique deli instead of Woolies. They'll sell it like investing in our safety, but here's the reality: the more we spend on this gear, the less there is for hospitals, schools, and infrastructure that actually makes life better. But you won't hear that from Albanese while he's posing in front of a fighter jet, and you won't hear it from Luxon when he's talking up enhanced interoperability with Australia. What you will hear is the same recycled line about standing together with our allies in uncertain times. It's the political equivalent of a magician's misdirection. Keep your eyes on the shiny planes so you don't notice the money being siphoned out of your pocket. And then there's the migration shuffle they're quietly ironing out. Albanese wants to look like the good guy for giving more Kiwis a pathway to citizenship, but Luxon's looking at it from the other angle. He's losing workers faster than he can replace them. The pair will spin it as mutual opportunity, but the truth is, it's a one-way drain. Aussie industries get skilled workers on the cheap, while New Zealand cops the bill for training people who end up paying taxes across the ditch. And when those industries inevitably push wages down to keep costs competitive, it's not just the Kiwis who feel the pinch. Aussie workers get dragged down too. It's a race to the bottom dressed up as strengthening the labour market. The dirty secret? This brain drain works just fine for certain sectors on both sides because it keeps a steady flow of desperate workers who'll take whatever's offered. And while the politicians talk about shared prosperity, the only people actually sharing the prosperity are the ones sipping champagne in boardrooms, not the blokes stacking shelves or driving utes. But the most jaw-dropping part of this whole love-in between Albanese and Luxon is how they manage to make every problem sound like it's being solved while making it worse in slow motion. Take the deportation mess. It's being dressed up as a common-sense approach now, but the numbers are climbing back to Morrison-era levels. We're talking 22 Kiwis a month getting booted back, some of them barely remembering the country they were born in. Luxon says it's creating crime problems back home. Albanese says it's about keeping communities safe, and neither of them is actually fixing the root causes. Why? Because those root causes, poverty, unemployment, gang culture, aren't just politically inconvenient, they're expensive to address. It's much easier to play the tough guy and ship people off than to actually give them a reason not to re-offend. And in the middle of all this, the media circus rolls on, pumping out glossy footage of papyrus, scenic backdrops, and warm words about mateship. The reality behind the scenes is nothing like the brochure. Those closed-door sessions aren't about the average person's quality of life. They're about making sure both leaders walk away looking strong for their respective domestic audiences while ensuring their donor mates and corporate backers get exactly what they came for. Every handshake has a dollar sign behind it. Every joint statement has a carefully hidden clause that'll bite later. By the time the dust settles, here's what we'll be left with: more defense commitments that chain us tighter to foreign powers, migration settings that quietly benefit corporations over workers, trade deals that sound great on paper, but leave us paying more for the basics, and a Pacific region that's still being treated like a poker table instead of a community. And all of it wrapped up in a package of feel-good speeches and photo ops designed to make you think progress is being made. The saddest part? They're counting on people not caring enough to look deeper. They know most folks are too busy working 2 jobs or trying to keep the lights on to dig through policy documents or follow up on the fine print of these meetings. And that's exactly how they get away with it. They'll smile, shake hands, and move on to the next stage-managed event while the consequences of what they've agreed to start unfolding slowly, quietly, and often irreversibly. So yeah, Albanese and Luxon might look like they're just 2 blokes doing the diplomatic thing in a picture-perfect Kiwi resort town, but the truth is way murkier. This isn't about friendship. It's not even really about the Australian-New Zealand relationship. It's about power. Who gets to hold it, who gets to use it, and who ends up paying the price. And mate, if you're watching this thinking it's all harmless political theatre, just wait. Because by the time the headlines have moved on, the real impact will be hitting you where it hurts, in your wallet, your workplace, and your future. And by then, the handshakes and speeches will be long forgotten. but the deals they stitched up in Queenstown will still be shaping your life for years to come. And here's the thing, mate, the danger isn't just in the policies themselves, it's in the way these two are setting up the narrative so we barely notice what's happening until it's already too late. Albanese and Luxon have mastered the political art of announce now, adjust later, meaning they roll out a headline that sounds perfectly harmless, strengthening cooperation, removing trade barriers, supporting regional partners, and then, once the media cycle moves on, they tweak the fine print so the benefits trickle straight to the people who don't need them. By the time you figure out you're paying more for basics, or that your job's been offshored because of some quiet harmonization clause, it's months down the track and no one's even reporting on it. They're selling this trip as a big step forward for the Pacific family, but if you've been paying attention, you can see it's more like a family business meeting where the cousins in charge decide how to carve up the assets without asking the rest of us. Look at the so-called single economic market they keep hyping. Yeah, it removes barriers for trade, but it also makes it easier for corporate giants to play both sides against the middle. If wages are cheaper in NZ, companies threaten to shift jobs there. If conditions are looser in Australia, they shift them back. Workers become bargaining chips in a game where the only goal is squeezing every last cent out of the system. And don't think for a second that all these joint security initiatives are about helping the Pacific nations themselves. Those countries are just the chessboard for a much bigger game between the West and China. Luxon and Albanese will say they're helping build resilience in the region, but what they really mean is making sure these nations stay in our camp. That's why you're seeing military training, infrastructure loans, and diplomatic visits ramp up. It's about influence, not altruism. If a Pacific country dares to lean too far towards Beijing, you can bet the phone calls start flying, the funding gets renegotiated, and the pressure gets dialed up until they fall back in line. Meanwhile, back home, both leaders will sell it as protecting our national interests, which sounds noble until you realize those interests are often just the financial stakes of a handful of powerful players. Think about who's getting the defense contracts, who's building the ports, who's supplying the tech. It's not your average small business owner in Queenstown or Cairns. It's multinational giants with ties to both political parties. And the kicker? We're paying for it through our taxes while they get richer off the back of strategic partnerships. Then there's the environmental card they love to play when it suits them. Expect to hear talk about sustainable development and preserving natural heritage, especially when they're promoting tourism. Sounds great on paper, but scratch the surface and you'll see it's just greenwashed PR to sell more high-end eco-tours to wealthy overseas visitors. Locals? They're the ones footing the bill through higher living costs, reduced access to their own natural spaces, and watching their towns turn into playgrounds for tourists while housing becomes impossible to afford. And when the environment actually needs defending against mining interests, against overfishing, against dodgy development, suddenly all that preservation talk goes quiet. The media is not going to dig into any of this because it ruins the neat little narrative of two leaders coming together in challenging times. They'll roll the B-roll of Maury welcomes, the sweeping drone shots of alpine lakes, the handshake in front of national flags, all the set pieces that make it look like politics is working as it should. But the truth is, the real business is happening in those side rooms and private dinners, the places where cameras aren't allowed and journalists who ask the wrong questions suddenly find themselves off the invite list next time. By the time this whole Queenstown weekend is over, here's what we'll be left with. A bunch of vague promises, a few token announcements, and a string of backroom agreements that we'll only learn about when they start hitting our wallets. It'll all be wrapped in the warm glow of strengthened ties and mutual respect, but don't mistake that for progress. Progress for who? Not for the average worker, not for the pensioner trying to afford groceries, not for the young couple priced out of both the Aussie and Kiwi housing markets. The only ones moving forward here are the ones already ahead of the pack. And when you see the press releases about shared values and working together to tackle global challenges, remember this, those values they're talking about aren't yours. They're the values of a political and corporate class that survives by keeping you just comfortable enough not to revolt, but never so well off that you can truly hold them accountable. It's a balancing act, and they're bloody good at it. So next time Albanese and Luxon pop up on your screen all smiles and platitudes, think about what's happening off camera. Think about the deals you'll never see, the policies you'll never vote on, the consequences you'll feel without ever having a say. because that's the real story of this weekend in Queenstown. Not the photo ops, not the speeches, but the quiet, calculated stitching up of the future in a way that works brilliantly for them and their mates, and leaves the rest of us just trying to keep up. And by the time we realize how much we've been stitched up, they'll be on to the next summit, the next set of promises, and the same old game will keep rolling on. See you in the next one, and don't forget to slap that like button like it just slapped you with another Australia-New Zealand friendship press release while the real drama's happening behind closed doors. Oi, and if you're really fired up, grab the "Can I vote for a kangaroo?" T, wear it when you're watching Albanese and Lux and smile for the cameras, knowing they're quietly arm wrestling over the Pacific, trade deals, and who's really calling the shots. Stay loud, stay awake, and never stop calling out the politics they hope you'll never notice.